Essay point number 10. Jesus, Peter, Paul, the poor, and the Gentiles did not tithe. Jesus, Peter, Paul, the poor, and the Gentiles did not tithe. This is because we must apply the strict, narrow biblical definition of tithes being land, food from the land and herds of Israel, and only from inside Israel. Jesus was a carpenter. What carpenters made and produced was from their own skills, their own hands, their own increase, and that does not qualify under the definition of the biblical tithing. Paul was a tent maker. Most of what Paul made, he made from skins, and he sold in marketplaces outside of Israel. In the first place, the products that Paul made were not tithable items. In the second place, where Paul made those items and sold those items were outside the Holy Land of Israel. Paul could bring free will offerings from those products, but they were disqualified as items that could be tithed upon. Peter was a fisherman. The Word of God nowhere tells us that fishermen ever brought tithes of fish they caught to the Levites and the priests in the form of tithing. The fish did not belong in the category of tithable items. It would be very difficult to place them there because of the characteristics of what fish ate and the source the fish came from. The poor did not tithe. Usually after 2 or 3 generations of the biblical application of the double portion of the land to the firstborn, most of the Israelites were pushed off of the land. They either worked as day laborers for their relatives, in which case their relatives who owned the land paid the tithe, or they migrated to the cities and took up crafts and trades, in which the products of crafts and trades were not tithable items. Therefore the poor did not tithe, and neither did the Gentiles tithe. The Gentiles themselves in the Old Testament were considered unclean. They themselves were unclean. Everything they touched was unclean. A Gentile could not bring a tithe to the Levites and priests and offer it to them. It would not have been accepted as a tithe. Therefore, it is wrong to teach that the Old Covenant started with everybody having to pay a tithe. The false assumption I mentioned earlier is totally wrong. The Bible does not teach that everybody in the Old Covenant was required to begin their giving level at 10%. That only applied to landowners and herdsmen who lived inside the Holy Land of Israel. That brings us to the widow's mite. The widow was not bringing what she brought as salary for Levites and priests. What the Levite brought, what the widow brought, she placed into the treasure chest inside the women's court in the temple. And that treasure chest was not destined for salaries for Levites and priests. That treasure chest was for the poor and for temple maintenance. And most likely when she left the temple, she also was given more money from that chest because she was a poor widow. Therefore, it is wrong to use the widow's mite as an example of tithing. The widow was giving a free will offering, and her gift was accepted by God. Not because it was a tithe, not because she was giving her all, but because she was